centers like this one outside the 30-kilometer perimeter drawn around the Fukushima nuclear plant, residents line up to be checked for radiation.
If they test me, I will be relieved.
Emergency workers were forced to temporarily leave the plant Wednesday when radiation levels began to soar, slowing efforts to prevent a meltdown. Hundreds of thousands of people have evacuated the area around the plant. Those living within the 30-kilometer radius of the facility have been told to stay indoors. A growing number of foreigners and Japanese are leaving the country. The president of the U.S.-based Institute for Energy and Environmental Research, Arjun Makajani, says the Japan nuclear crisis is unique.
We're witnessing a completely unprecedented nuclear accident in that there have never been 3 reactors in the same place at the same time that have had a severe accident.
The Fukushima plant has experienced an explosion in 3 of its reactors and a fire at its 4th.
I would say it's a very severe accident. It doesn't appear to be on the scale of the most severe accident so far, which would be Chernobyl. By far, it doesn't appear to be that scale of accident because that kind of radioactivity hasn't been measured.
In 1986, a nuclear facility at Chernobyl, Ukraine, then part of the Soviet Union, experienced a fire and explosion in its reactor. Large swaths of Ukraine, Belarus, and Russia were contaminated from the nuclear fallout. Kevin Camps of Beyond Nuclear, a U.S.-based group that opposes nuclear energy, says radioactivity appears to be spreading significantly, including radioactive iodine isotopes, which aggressively attack the human thyroid gland.
Radioactive iodine can be excreted from the human body if tablets are given in time. They're called potassium iodide tablets. We saw at Chernobyl what can happen when people are exposed to radioactive iodine-131. There's been a thyroid epidemic of disease, cancers, other pathologies in adults, but especially children in the Chernobyl region of Ukraine and Belarus and Western Russia.
The partial meltdown of a reactor at 3 Mile Island was the United States' worst nuclear accident. Experts say the situation in Japan has surpassed what happened there in 1979. In the 3 Mile Island incident, there were no injuries or deaths, and very low levels of radiation were found later in plants and animals. Nuclear reactors are housed behind layers of protection because the fuel rods used in the reactors emit high levels of heat. Usually water cools the rods, but when cooling fails, the temperature can become hot enough to melt the rods. Kevin Camp says nuclear engineers are struggling to keep fuel rods from overheating at Fukushima.
The meltdown could go right through the reactor vessel, right through the containment system, right out into the environment, and there's nothing that can be done to stop it if they don't restore cooling.
How bad the situation becomes and how long-lasting an impact the crisis could have on Fukushima and surrounding areas depends largely on what happens next. 2 decades after Chernobyl, the United Nations launched a 10-year recovery effort that continues to this day. William Ide, VOA News, Washington.